morning, everybody. My name is Lisa Retzlaff, and I've been employed with Kenosha County Human Services for the past 17 years as a child protective worker doing abuse and neglect investigations. During that time, I've had the opportunity to work with well over 1,000 families. And today I'd like to give a brief synopsis into one family who posed a set of challenges for our multidisciplinary approach to child welfare and safety. The family that I would like to discuss today is comprised of a 31-year-old mother named Nancy, her 6-year-old daughter named Mary. The child's biological father, Dan, is currently incarcerated for domestic abuse to Nancy, as well as for drug activity. At the time of the investigation, Nancy was involved in a relationship with Donald, who was residing in her home. The family first came to the attention of Juvenile Crisis in March 2015. I'd like to explain our Juvenile Crisis program here in Kenosha. It's a contracted agency that works in partnership with DCFS, and they take in our child abuse and neglect calls anytime DCFS was closed, so after hours, weekends, and holidays. They are staffed 365 days a year, and they're open 24 hours a day. All of the child abuse and neglect referrals that are made are staffed with a DCFS supervisor who oversees their involvement. So at the time of the call, the reporter was concerned that Donald was watching pornographic movies in front of 6-year-old Mary, and that both Donald and Nancy were selling drugs in the presence of the child. Additionally, the reporter was concerned that Mary was being a victim of physical abuse by her mother, as well as concerns about truancy for her, and she was only a kindergartner at a local elementary school. The first interview of Mary was conducted by Juvenile Crisis at her school at the request of DCFS. We often like to interview children in that setting for a couple different reasons. They're less influenced by alleged maltreaters who may be residing in their home, as well as children are often more comfortable to talk about their family problems outside of their family home. When the interview started, Mary right away started with "nothing is going on," proceeded with I don't know anything else. The worker was concerned that it appeared that Mary may have been coached not to talk about what was going on in her home. The worker, however, was able to discern that Mary did have some knowledge of Donald using marijuana and alcohol in the house, and that her mother had a warrant out for her arrest. She also did talk about inappropriate movies that Donald would watch that depicted naked people and sex. She denied being a victim of physical abuse by anybody in the home. When Nancy was interviewed, she did confirm that Donald did watch inappropriate movies in front of Mary and did drink alcohol in the home. She also reported an incident where Donald had given Mary an ice-cold bath as a form of punishment. She, at that time, agreed to not have contact between Mary and Donald because she knew that her daughter did not feel safe around him. At this time, we did refer the matter to the Kenosha Police Department. Referrals are made to our sensitive crimes unit any time child abuse or neglect appears to rise to the level of criminal activity. In Kenosha County, we have the benefit of working very well with our detectives in both the Kenosha Police Department and in the Kenosha Sheriff's Department. We work our cases together, we typically do our interviews together, and we respect the information that the other party needs during an investigation. This is very beneficial to our families, and it appears to be a situation that's somewhat unique to Kenosha County. So in March, Juvenile Crisis, again at the request of DCFS, had contact with Nancy and Mary at their home. It was apparent from the start that Nancy was continuing to have contact with Donald and that he was still residing in the home. She contradicted her original statements. She indicated that he was not using alcohol or drugs in the home, he was not abusive in any way, and had not watched any of these inappropriate movies. The worker attempted to have her sign and agree to what's called a protective plan. A protective plan is an informal agreement that DCFS and a parent put together that helps alleviate what the safety threats are. And in this case, she was asked to sign a protective plan to eliminate the contact between Donald and Mary, and she refused to do that. During the interview, she vacillated from calling her daughter the light of her life to a manipulative liar. When Nancy was asked about alleged physical abuse in the home, she said, quote, "If anyone's being abused, I am." Now keep in mind, this is a 6-year-old child. DCFS made several attempts to interview Donald, but he failed to show up for any of the scheduled home visits. In the state of Wisconsin, it is a requirement that we attempt to interview all members of the household. It's important because all members, whether they're related or not, play a vital role in that child's upbringing and the available information to our assessment process. Unfortunately, not all members cooperate with us, and some just don't want to get involved. A few days later, DCFS did attempt to interview Mary again at her elementary school and was advised that she had been withdrawn from school by her mother in order for DCFS to not speak with her. The school social worker at that time confirmed that the child had missed 19 and a half days of school and was tardy 45 times, and she's only in kindergarten. And this is not typical for children at that age. DCFS also found out that Donald and Nancy were now engaged to be married and were planning on buying a house together. DCFS became increasingly concerned about Nancy's mental health and the alleged drug use in the home based on Nancy's behaviors and her inconsistent statements. Unfortunately, Mary was not making any disclosures of abuse by either Mom or Donald, and the present threats to safety that would have allowed us to remove Mary from her home did not exist. DCFS did, however, feel that continued efforts to intervene in this family were necessary and that possible court intervention was likely to happen if things didn't rapidly improve. In April of this year, Kenosha Police Department Detective Jeremy DeWitt met with Nancy and attempted to schedule a CAC interview. A CAC interview is a forensic interview that occurs at our Child Advocacy Center here in Kenosha. It's a video recorded interview done by a trained interviewer, and it's designed to limit the number of times children have to talk about abuse or neglect that they endured. A team consisting of law enforcement, social services, and district attorneys watch this interview from another room via television. The caregivers who bring the child to the interview meet with an advocate from Women's and Children's Horizons to discuss supportive services. Nancy refused to cooperate with this interview, but a few days later, Detective DeWitt made a second attempt and met with Nancy and Donald in their home and was able to convince them to allow this interview to occur. At that home visit, Detective DeWitt felt that Nancy was under the influence of some type of drugs, but she denied it, and the child was not making any disclosures of anything inappropriate. One of the difficulties that we had in this case is that the mother was prescribed medications, legally prescribed medications, that are often abused on the street. And so anytime a UA would have been done on her, it would have shown the drugs that she's prescribed by her doctor, which becomes even more difficult than to prove that she's actually using them. Also, drug use in and of itself doesn't necessarily mean that children are unsafe in their home. There has to be some evidence that the children's needs are not being met, or they're in some type of physical harm as a result of this drug use. In this case, the home was clean, there was ample food, Donald did not appear to be under the influence, and Mary wasn't making any disclosures. So in April, Mary was brought to the CAC by her mother, Nancy, and was interviewed by interviewer Julie McGuire. Within minutes of the interview, she would respond, everything about Donald is no. She would answer general questions about her household, but nothing about discipline or the interactions in the home. She stated several times that she needed to do well in the interview, otherwise she would not be able to go see her sister. It was apparent that she had been coached not to talk about the things that had happened, however, her mother denied this. Donald was not present at the CAC. That is one of the policies that any alleged maltreater not be there so as not to negatively influence the child's statements. So DCFS continued to get reports from the relatives of Nancy expressing their concerns about her parenting and her general character. A sibling of the mother's reported that Nancy was abusing her prescription medication and could possibly be using street drugs. The sibling also felt that the mother was physically abusing the child. The grandfather had described living with his daughter as being traumatizing and awful, and stated that she had at one point been caught shoplifting while Mary was with her. The mother's stepfather reported that he had video recordings of the mother hitting the child and that she was abusing Oxycontin. The grandmother, however, only felt that her daughter needed to get her life on track, but felt that Mary was otherwise safe. So in April of this year, DCFS referred the family to Kenosha Area Family and Aging Services Family Preservation Program. It's one of our more intense programs here in Kenosha where workers go out 4 to 5 times a week to provide parenting instruction and to do safety checks. This has been found to be significantly less trauma to the child because it keeps them in the home as long as we can address the safety factors that were first identified. So in May, the supervisor of that program contacted myself and indicated that Nancy was not meeting with the workers like she should be and was in fact declining the services. I was also told that she had an arrest warrant out for her for failure to pay a fine. So the culminating event occurred on May 8th when we received another referral from a relative. That relative had gotten a call from the grandmother who had picked the child up from school that day and noticed a bruise under the child's eye. When she asked the child what happened, she stated that her mom had hit her. Attempts were made by DCFS to locate Nancy and Mary, but her whereabouts were unknown at that time. Unfortunately, we had gotten this call after Mary had already gone back to her mom's care. We had asked Juvenile Crisis to make attempts after hours to locate the family, and they were able to do so the next day. They responded to the home with law enforcement, and they observed Mary to have a bruise approximately 3 inches long that extended from the bridge of her nose all the way underneath to the corner of her eye. Mary denied that she had been hit by anybody. Even though she had admitted to her grandmother that this had happened, she denied to the workers and law enforcement that anybody had hit her. She stated that she had been doing gymnastics in her room and that she had fallen off her bed and hit her face on the wall. She was being influenced to some degree by her mother, who was in another room and was calling out explanations to the child as the child was talking to the workers. Mary did say that her eye still hurt her really bad and that she had had a lot of blood on it. And she was able to show the officer a shirt that had a large amount of blood on it, and that was later taken into evidence. Nancy repeated that she loved her child, that she would never hurt her child. At one point, she stated that she wasn't even in the home when it happened, but she admitted that she had applied makeup to the child's face in order for the children at school not to make fun of her. It was determined that Mary had disclosed to her grandmother and her uncle that her mom had hit her and that she was bleeding. The grandmother reported to law enforcement that Nancy had admitted to hitting her and told her, "I don't want her anymore, you can have her." The grandmother stated that she's heard Nancy cussing at her child, and when she asked Nancy, "Why did you hit her?" she said, "Because the child doesn't listen to her." During the interview, the uncle also confirmed that he observed this injury and observed his sister admitting to hitting her child. So during an interview with law enforcement detectives, Nancy admitted that she did hit this child out of frustration, that she had grabbed her by the arm and hit her in the face. She admitted to causing her nose to bleed, but adamantly denied that she had anything to do with the bruising on the child's face. She admitted that she told Mary not to tell anybody about it. And this is very common for parents to try to dissuade their children anytime they think that law enforcement or DCFS could possibly get involved. So because Mary had this significant facial injury and had disclosed to more than one person that she had been hit, her safety was compromised and she could no longer remain in the home of her mother. The past weeks of DCFS involvement and her refusal to participate in services played a decision in detaining Mary outside of her home. Anytime children are removed from their home, DCFS is obligated to attempt to locate relative placement. And in this particular situation, Mary's aunt was more than willing to take her in and provide care for her until further notice. These placements are the most suitable for children because they tend to be less traumatic for them. So this process of removing a child from the home starts with DCFS contacting our juvenile intake services and providing them with information on the reasonings why we feel that children are not safe in their environment. JCI approves or denies these requests. In this case, it was approved. And they sign a temporary physical custody order, which is a legal document depicting that the child is in an out-of-home placement, is under the temporary physical custody of Kenosha County, and placed in alternative care. The TPC order in this case was authorized and Mary was legally placed with her aunt. This process also initiates a court process that starts with a detention hearing that's held before one of the commissioners in our intake court. At the detention hearing, juvenile intake is present and they explain to the court the reasons why children are removed from their home. The assistant district attorney and the DCFS worker have input on such matters such as out-of-home placement, visitation. Attempts are made to have the parents involved in that process as well. After reviewing all the facts, the commissioner makes a decision on whether children should remain in out-of-home care and whether parents should be allowed any form of visitation with their children. In this particular case, Mary, the legal placement, the outside of home placement of Mary was continued, and Nancy was given supervised visitation with the child. A detention review several days later was scheduled in order for DCFS to have time to investigate the matter and determine whether or not further court jurisdiction needed to occur. So at the time of the detention hearing, hearing, Nancy had been arrested based on the physical abuse to Mary, and I had met with her prior to that hearing. She minimized the entire situation. She indicated that she had done nothing wrong. She stated that she had only spanked her daughter for using some profanity towards her, and that she felt that she was going to get the child back that day, regardless of the fact that she was actually in custody. She denied causing the black eye, and she also stated that when she met with the detectives that they had tricked her, and that she denied that she had ever made any disclosure that she had hit her daughter. So we were given this time to investigate, so I went to the school and I attempted to meet with Mary again at her elementary school. She presented with very good verbal skills. She participated in rapport building. She could differentiate between a truth and a lie, and she promised to tell the truth. All of the things that we kind of look at to determine whether or not we're going to get an accurate, valid statement from children. I observed the redness under her eye that was the result of the original injury from her mom. She told me that she had hit her head on the wall while doing gymnastics. She told me that she never told anybody that her mom had hit her. She denied telling her grandma or her uncle this. She changed the story a second time, and she said that her mom was bending over and it accidentally kicked her. And she actually demonstrated this action to me. When I said, well, you know, your mom did admit that she had hit you. Well, she must have meant something else, she said. Mary provided a third story and said that her mom was swinging her arm around and had accidentally hit her in the nose, causing her to bleed. She denied any of the allegations that related to Donald. I terminated the interview at this point with Mary because she had obviously been coached. This is one of the most difficult interviews that I have done in my 17 years because of the level of coaching, and I don't think that I've ever seen a child coached to that degree ever before. I made a decision not to have another CAC because of that. Even though that seems kind of disturbing, this is very typical for kids to be aligned with their caregivers, even their abusive caregivers. With Mary, she was very aligned with her mom. She wanted to be with her. She would ask when she would go back home with her mom. Children experience even some level of trauma when they're separated from their abusive caregivers. In this case, Nancy would make promises to Mary, and she would buy her all kinds of things in order to maintain her loyalty. I believe that this placement with the aunt was going to be long-term. So during several of the state-required home visits to that placement, I informed Mary's aunt of this and asked her to consider the longevity of the placement. At that time, she assured me that she was in it for the long haul, that the only thing she needed some help with was child care assistance. The maternal grandmother was willing to help, but I also helped the aunt guide her through that process with the state. I observed Mary in her aunt's home on several occasions, and she was adjusting very well, but she had also spent a lot of time there, so it's a familiar environment for her. The aunt reported that Mary would often ask about her mom and ask when she could go home. She was allowing mom to have phone contact with Mary, but once she realized that Nancy was making promises to the child that she couldn't follow through on, the aunt terminated those phone calls, which the division agreed with that decision. I made several attempts to engage Nancy, either over the phone or to come in person to meet with me to discuss these allegations, to discuss a plan on where we were going to go from there. And she would never do so. She always had employment reasons why she couldn't come in to meet with me. She showed up one time to do a UA, and at that time she was too busy to meet with the worker. Understanding the importance of maintaining parent and child contact, I did make a referral to Children's Hospital of Wisconsin for supervised visitation. That process was significantly delayed because Nancy wasn't cooperating and wasn't coming in to develop a plan for that. Due to the level of coaching, we had to advise the visitation worker of that to keep close eye on these conversations and interactions that Nancy would be having with her child. And this, again, was very difficult for Mary because she didn't understand any of that. She just wanted to know why she couldn't go home. As of May 13th, her elementary school had reported that she had 5 truancies, 47 unexcused tardies, 10 unexcused absences, and 16 excused absences. And please remember that Mary's only 6 years old, and she doesn't make decisions on her attendance for school. DCFS at that time had also had 5 previous CPS reports and 2 child welfare reports. A CHIPS petition, which stands for Children in Need of Protection and Services, was filed because I, as an investigating worker, did feel that Mary was a victim of physical abuse by her mother, and that she was a child in need of protection and services. I drafted this petition and submitted it to our DA's office, who reviews it and files a formal petition to the court. Depending upon, as the process moves along, eventually this process goes from the commissioner and is brought before the judge, who oversees this process and makes decisions based on what's happening in the case. Depending on the pleas entered, this matter can either go to trial or can go to disposition, which at the time, parents are given their conditions of return. And those are the things that parents are required to do before children can safely be returned back to their care. So at the present time, Mary, she remains in out-of-home placement with her maternal aunt and participates with supervised visits with her mom. This has been a difficult situation for the aunt, who is also a professional, and the placement did take its toll on the aunt's relationship with her boyfriend, who had been living in the home at the time of the placement and no longer is. The child's biological father remains incarcerated in a prison here in Wisconsin. His family has shown little to no interest in any placement of Mary. Nancy continues to face criminal charges both here and in another county, and she was recently released from jail on new charges of bail jumping. She continues to minimize the situation and has made little effort to cooperate with DCFS. It is still believed that she is abusing her prescription medications and has uncontrolled mental health issues that are not being managed. The CHIPS matter remains unresolved and is currently pending in court. Thank you.